saying he was on his way home. I am Robin Schwartz. I am the Program and Grant Director of the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County, which is the Tompkins County Arts Council. Tonight's event is Story House Ithaca event that was folded into our annual Spring Rights Literary Festival. Most of the readings and performances and panels and such happened in May, and there's 8 additional workshops that continue through September. This is one of them. There are 3 more free writing workshops at springrights.org, and I'm just going to put the link in the chat. I want to thank our Art Trail sponsors and funders who give us enough funds to basically run 40 Spring Rights annual events for free to the general public and to pay the 120 participating writers. So thank you to Ithaca College, M&T Bank, the Odyssey Bookstore on Green Street, the Marriott Hotel on the Commons, CFCU Community Credit Union, and Wegmans. We do media sponsored trades with WSKG, WITH, and Cinemapolis. And additional support is from the Tompkins County Tourism Program and an Upstate Fair Games grant. Poets and writers provided grant funds directly to many of the writers. So thank you to all of those. So that was 150 words. I'll annotate it after tonight's talk and then represent and see how it's different. I will now turn the program over to Jonathan Miller and Leslie Green, co-creators and co-founders of Story House Ithaca. I'm looking for Jonathan. There he is.
I'm hanging out.
I guess I'll start talking.
Oh,
wait,
that's not him.
That's not John.
I'm sorry. Sorry, Mary. Yeah, again, 300 times I've done this. There he is.
There he is. So yes, I'm Leslie Green. There's Jonathan Miller. Thanks, Robin and Community Arts Partnership so much. This is a really great festival. This is our 2nd event in this year's festival, and we think it's cool. And thank you to everyone for being here. So just quick few words about Story House Ithaca, because maybe you don't know about us. We're a 2-year-old not-for-profit. We're a project of the Center for Transformative Action. And our mission is to bring people together around stories, because we think communities are stronger when people get to know each other better. So we have regular ongoing events. We've got a regular story night, a presentation night, artist gym. We've got an intergenerational playwriting workshop called Stages of Life. We've got a film festival, the Black to the Future Film Festival, that's with showings throughout the year. And then we also organize lots of one-offs, we had a traveling exhibition of art and writing by incarcerated people that we brought to public libraries around the Finger Lakes this winter and spring. And yeah, at the end, we'll tell you what's coming up. But go to our website, we'll put it in the chat, follow us on Facebook and Instagram so you can find out what's going on with us. John.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah, my job is a quickie, and that is to introduce our extraordinary presenters tonight. And I was just thinking that the most appropriate thing to say about each might be both contain multitudes. Jaime Warburton is an assistant professor of writing at IC. She's also a poet, an essayist, a short story writer, an actor, a dramaturg, dancer and singer, maybe not professionally, but she is those things, and an expert in fan culture. Very happy to have Jaime, whose idea this workshop was, with us tonight. And Em Ludek, a singer and multi-instrumentalist, including keyboards, tenor sax, drums, guitar, and I am suspecting that there are more. They have a music degree from Cornell. They also tune pianos. Take it away, Jaime and Em.
This is a great reminder for us to all get our pianos tuned. If you have a piano, it's probably out of tune. I know mine is. Welcome tonight. I am so glad to see you here. please do feel free to turn your camera on if you'd like, and also don't feel like you must. That is okay. I'm going to also ask you to feel free to use the chat. Sometimes it's really nice to be able to ask questions or participate that way quickly without feeling like you're on the spot or you have to unmute yourself or ask if you can speak. I'm happy for us to use the chat for things as well. And I'd also love to give everybody a moment to see if they know where their reaction buttons are. How many of you already know how to make your Zoom self window give a little, oh, there, Jane knows. Jane knows how to make it clap. Nancy's got something, thumbs up, hearts, laughing. Rhonda, yes. Hey, Sarah, you got it. Leslie's an old hand, an old thumb, if you will. All right, beautiful. Kim, Jonathan's got it too. Okay, nice. And Matthew, Rhonda, Kai, lovely. Okay, thanks, y'all. So I'm asking you where those things are, because sometimes I'm going to ask the group some questions, and we're going to do that close to the beginning. And so then if you are answering in the affirmative to that question, I'll ask that you click any one of those reaction buttons, whether you like it to be celebratory or laugh at us or whatever else it feels good to do. So thank you for coming to join us this evening. I'm going to give you a brief outline of what our expectations are for the evening, and then I'm going to ask you some of those questions. And here we go. Some of those questions will be related to your levels of interest, experience, the genres that you work in, what you like or don't like about listening to yourself read or somebody else reading. And that's going to help to make sure that Em and I can cover things that are really useful to the greatest number of people here and not be yammering on about something that's not of use to most people here. So that's going to be really helpful to us. After we do that and sort of see where our feet are settled, I'm going to ask Em to start playing a little bit of music for us. And they're going to play some tunes that will be familiar to you, some brief excerpts. And after every one of those excerpts, we're going to briefly talk a little bit. So again, at that point, you might be using your reaction hand to answer some questions. You might just be using the chat. If you're more comfortable wanting to speak verbally, that's okay too. We can think a little bit of our time together tonight as part music appreciation and part speaking appreciation. What we're going to do is break down so many of the different responses that we can have to music, often just really instinctively, and start talking about some of the ways that we can really concretely apply these techniques to our plans for our own reading out loud. And many of us are nervous when we read out loud too. We're not sure who's listening to us, how it's going to be taken, how many people are in the room. Did your mom come because you have some stuff to say about her you don't really want to say in front of her? And when we're nervous about speaking or writing, it can really pay off to put in that preparation, that concrete kind of preparation as well, because then it allows that preparation to override our nervousness, right? So then Em and I are going to work together to demonstrate how some of these terms and techniques that we will have pulled out from the music can really affect the ways that we hear things, whether it's the same simple tune or it's the way I might be reading something out loud. I'll end up reading a few sentences out loud in various ways, and Em will imitate on the keyboard exactly what it sounds like so that we can hear the musicality precisely in that way. Then we're going to talk about the ways that you yourself might apply these thoughts to marking up your own work. And I know that when Robin was sending out reminders, she suggested that everybody bring a bit of a writing sample along with them, maybe 100 words or so. And we're going to take some time to break out, mute ourselves, turn off cameras, spend a little time actually enacting some of that annotation on our own writing samples. We can start to get a feel for it. Towards the very end, if there are a few people who wish to read out loud from their writing sample, we'll also have open time for that. You would never be forced to read out loud. And Robin is going to stop the recording before we get to the part where people are welcome to read out loud if they'd like to. So again, if that's something that you're like, oh, I am just practicing, guys, don't worry. That can also just be a practicing time. Okay. That was my outline. All right. Just off the top of everybody's heads, are there any questions folks would like to ask me at first, or anything that hearing that outline made you wonder if we'd be talking about? At this point, you could use the chat if you wished, or if you wanted to hit one of your reaction buttons and speak out loud, that would be okay too. I'm going to give it a minute to see if anybody has anything. All right, not so much, and that is fine. So I'm going to open this up by explaining one of the ways that this makes sense to me. So as Jonathan mentioned, professionally, I'm a writer and a teacher and an actor, and long ago in my life, a semi-professional musician. Of course, I still play music, I still sing, I still of course, act and write poetry and prose, and all of these things to me have come together to really be about the same kind of thing, which is expression, right? Expression in a way that gets us to understand, to feel understood, and to be understood, but also in a way that welcomes an understanding that is not necessarily intellectual, or what we think of as intellectual. I want us to start out by thinking of some of the ways that we understand the worlds around us and the worlds within us. For example, if I take my fingertips and kind of lightly stroke my forearm, I'm not intellectually understanding what's happening, but my body responds. My fingertips can feel the tiny little hairs on my arm, right? It can feel the part where my arm starts to get fleshier, the part where it starts to get bonier. My arm itself feels those little like tingly feelings that you feel when you gently run your finger across your arm. I'm feeling those physical sensations from both sides, like I'm creating them and I'm making them. I don't understand them intellectually, but I experience them in a way that I say to myself, okay, I understand what's happening. This means something to me. It's the same way we might understand autumn, for example. We might understand autumn from the scent that the fallen leaves make after they start to become crunched and they start to have that little layer of leaf mold underneath. You can smell fall, right? You can smell that kind of crispness in the wind. You know, your body knows the difference between a summer wind, a winter wind, and an autumn wind. And very often we can experience art the same way. How many of you have ever been to a museum with a modern art display? Use one of your little hand reactions or just raise your for real hand. Good, right? Okay, what's one of the first things that people tend to say about modern art? I don't understand it, right? Or my 3-year-old could finger paint that, or whatever else it is. But sometimes we still have this experience when you're standing there looking at the wall and yeah, it is a big black dot in front of you. And yeah, maybe you've seen a big black dot before, but somehow you can still start to have an experience with it, right? How many of you have either sung to children or remember being sung to as a child? Right. Oh my gosh, the ways that we experience that. Now, most people who sing to their children or who are sung to do not identify as opera singers. They're usually not trained, right? We're not necessarily, our ears aren't trained when we're 6 months old being sung to. But what are some of the ways we understand that singing? Go ahead and use the chat if you like, or if you'd like to raise your hand and speak. What do you think some of the ways are that we understand that singing or that music, whether you're singing to a child or you're remembering the experience of having been sung to? Jay says, my
For
kids
me-
call me Jukebox Jane, a song for every occasion, right? There's always something, there's always music. Sharing meaning and feelings, right? Kai, what do you think?
Oh, well, for me also, it's part of an oral history. And like, I know that that's different for some people now than it might have been or might be in certain indigenous cultures that had even more of a tradition. But I know, like, I'm part of I'm Quaker, and the Quaker youth group that I grew up going to, I remember like almost every conference we would sing Circle Game. And in Circle Game, it's by Joni Mitchell, and the child goes 10 times around the seasons, and then it's the 16 springs and 16 summers gone now, and then 20, I can't remember what it is for 20, but I remember being 8 and being like, oh, 10 is so old, and then I remember getting to like ages 16 and 20, and like, like that I had been singing it that long. It was like part of that oral history that like touched the heartstrings so much. And so like none of the people were, particularly fancy singers, but like that
Yeah.
oral history part of it, like kind of, or then that connection was really important.
Absolutely. It's a kind of weaving, right? A weaving of community and a weaving through time also. I know that Joni Mitchell song. And so when you said the lyrics, I didn't just experience, oh yeah, 10, 20 summers. I remembered what it sounds like, right? And that helps for me to create the emotional response. So Susie's pointing out, we're understanding the emotion of it. Safety. I remember, my mother seemed really safe to me when she was singing. That's what I felt, regardless of what song it was. Jane's saying it's the rapt attention of her grandkids. What a way to get attention, right? Like we really focus in when it's music like that. Jonathan says that singing is like stepping into a different set of rules for time. That reminds me of what Kai was saying about oral history, right? And Rose is pointing out that we have comfort this way, right? A way to express narrating life in song and noticing your 4-year-old son doing the same. That is such a wonderful experience to have, right? When you watch a small person start to experience the world and make sense of the world in that way. Lovely. So this is the groundwork of some of what Em is going to take us through too with music. When we're going to take the really natural, instinctive kind of understanding that we bring to music and say, what is it about this piece, even if I haven't associated it yet with a particular person, a particular experience, what is it about this piece that creates my understanding of it? Right. I'm going to ask us a few more questions here. How many of you, go ahead, raise your real hand, make a little reaction, whatever's comfortable for you. How many of you do not read music? How many of you don't read music? 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. 5. Okay, beautiful. Reading music was not and is not a requirement for this. But I just wanted to check in and see if we did happen to have a room full of a lot of people who had read a lot of music. Diane, do you have a question, or is that your hand for responding? Okay, got it. So I have some more questions for us. How many of you sing, whether it's in the shower or the car? All right, shower car singers, beautiful. How many of you sing in a more formal way? You sing with a choir, maybe you sing at church, right? Okay. How many people here How many people here play an instrument of any kind? Okay. All right. So we've got some really nice breakouts here. It looks like sometimes we're about half and half here, half and half here. So what that's saying to me is that a lot of people are going to have a particular vocabulary or experience that they bring with them for musicality. All right. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions about writing. How many of you are in this workshop thinking about writing and reading poetry? For how many of you is it poetry? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, good bunch. Okay. For how many of you would you say it is fiction? How many of you are thinking about creating and reading out loud fiction? 1, 2, 3. Okay. I'm going to keep asking a few more different genres. How about specifically children's or young adult work? Children's or young adult fiction, maybe. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. All right. So how many of you are thinking about creative nonfiction, something like memoir, personal essay? Great. And then finally, this is my last genre question. How many of you are thinking about like nonfiction, like Guns, Germs, and Steels? You're thinking about a book that is a work of nonfiction, but is not about your life. Okay, good. I didn't think so. All right. So when we talk about these different forms of writing, and this is just before I'm about to start to ask Em to do some stuff. So they're rocking and ready. When we talk about these different genres, we often might think about poetry and lyrics or poetry and song together, right? Those might be the ones that we tend to think of together a little bit more because, of course, the tradition that is for us poetry was sung, right? Was oral, was something that really was music with words. And many of you who have ever been in a literatures and English class might have done something called scansion or scanning a poem. Have any of you done scansion, scanning a poem? Okay. A few people. I want to tell you that we are not going to do that here, FYI. It is a lovely skill to have and something that can be really helpful when it comes to beats. And we're going to make a little bit of reference to that. So for those of you who haven't done scansion, we'll tell you what that weird word means and how it might relate to music. But what we're going to be doing instead of using scansion symbols or talking about meters and feet in poetry is we're going to really give ourselves over to the musical world. And Em, I've asked you to prepare short excerpts, 8 bars or so, of a few different songs, and please choose whichever one you feel like doing first. I think we had like 3 or 4 on board. You want to just surprise us with one? So I'm not
Sure, yeah.
not giving away anybody's reactions.
Yeah, one that I think I would like to start with is King of the Road. If everyone here knows the Roger Miller song, it's one I like to kind of play in a few different styles, so I could just kind of maybe go through a little bit of that.
Great.
So.
You am? All right. So when I'm listening to that song, I know that I have some like particular kind of responses. Go ahead, use the chat, or if you feel like you're more comfortable participating verbally, do that. Type out what are some of the things that you hear or feel when you heard that particular rendition of the song, just this particular rendition, even if you knew this song already. you feel? Think about feelings words, right? So imagine you're in therapy and your therapist says, that's a thinking word, not a feeling word. Oh, Jane's talking about being reminded of her dad, upbeat, peppiness. Okay, those are similar. What else? What are some of the other ways that we feel hearing that song? Rocking back and forth, easy. I can't help but rock back and forth to that song, right? It's got a really clear beat. It's kind of carrying us. Oh, we've got another person remembering their dad. Yes. Empowered. All right. Okay. So some of the things that we're hearing that are a trend here, honky tonk piano. I love that phrase, honky tonk, right? Because that means you are kicking up your boots. We're hearing all of these different trends here. We've got being empowered. We've got like easy, upbeat, peppy. The way that we're feeling it move in our body, right? We might be kind of swinging side to side there, walking in the park with birds chirping in the trees. Wow, that's a way that we're helping to understand the outside world, the inside world, happiness. That's so lovely. We universally feel pretty good when we hear that song. Why the heck do you think we feel pretty good when we're hearing that song?
Most of it,
Is it because it's really slow?
I think it's pretty much all major chords. It's definitely like hitting that very strongly. And it's also like, the content of the lyrics are rather, I don't know, just like it's someone traveling a lot, but being very at home in that situation. So I feel like there's something kind of optimistic about that attitude. If you're familiar with the lyrics of the tune,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, like people are saying, it's upbeat, it's major, I don't know, it kind of hits that spot.
All right. So when I'm thinking about this rocking back and forth, the easy, happy here, this song follows a kind of wow pattern a lot, right? We go wow, and you can if you could pop your microphone volume up a bit, then I think everybody would have a little easier time hearing. Thank you, Jane, for
Sure,
pointing that
sure,
out, and thank you, Em.
I can do that.
Excellent. When we're thinking about that kind of that rhythm to the pattern, it happens over and over and over again, right? We get a little bit swung into that repetition. That's the thing that makes us feel horses, walking, easy, boots, right? But it doesn't do it constantly. No. We get up to this point where it goes bump, right? And when we think about these elements, we're talking about something I'm going to refer to as establishing a pattern of expectation and then breaking it. Patterns of expectation are the things that lull us, right? I'm going to go back to childhood again. When you want the baby to stop crying, do you make it move in irregular, jerky movements? No, you do the same thing over and over, over and over. It's how we lull ourselves. If you listen to an NPR podcast, you might fall asleep. It feels nice, but you'll be asleep, right? Patterns of expectation can lull us, but they can also lull us a little too far or a little annoyingly if they're the same all the time. What happens to us physically, sonically, emotionally is that when a pattern of expectation is suddenly broken, we notice it. We notice a lot. Thinking again about childhood, you do that thing where you bounce them on your knee and you're like riding the horsey, you know that one, right? And it's like bounce, 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 woof, and then you kind of pretend like they're going to drop a little bit. We love that, right? We love going along and then we drop a little bit. In pop songs, this is where you have that pause. Maybe you have the beat drop. You have a key shift, you have a choir come in the background, anything that takes what you have gotten used to already and then breaks it, it gets our attention, right? Attention getting is not always bigger, faster, louder, more. It's just different, right? Sometimes the thing that breaks the pattern and gets a listener's attention is quiet. Sometimes it's silence even. Sometimes it's slowing down. But anything that changes what we're expecting is going to draw our attention. Okay, so if you're thinking about putting some of these things together, we're going to name them all later, but you might be thinking, if you want to jot down for yourself some of the different ways that we might establish patterns of expectation, and then what it means for us to break them. And when we talk about break them, it's not just like, rah, pound it with a hammer, get rid of everything, but it might be just an adjustment, a change, right? In the chat, what do you think some of the modes sonically of breaking a pattern of expectation might be? I'm going to give you one to start off with. It's the one that I just used as an example. And it is, I was going loudly and then I got quiet. So we are going to call that dynamics. Right? We're going to call that dynamics when we are either getting more loud or more soft. All right. In poetry, it can be breaking the rhyme scheme. Absolutely. And so in words, we might say sonic and tonic are a rhyme, right? But we can use the concept of a rhyme to think about musical notes as well. I would argue, Em was pointing out that this song has a lot of major chords in it. Major chords feel like a rhyme, right? It's like, oh, that makes sense. This fits, right? Let's go through with it. All right. So in poetry, it might be breaking up a rhyme scheme. What are some of the other ways that a song might have patterns in it that we break? Think of anything? Tempo and a change of rhythm. All right. Silences and pauses where you might expect music and word. Good. Okay, so rhythm, if we're thinking rhythm is like this, but we go hamburger, 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 bun, bun, milkshake, milkshake, hamburger, hamburger. We're talking about different kinds of rhythms there. Getting a new instrument might be using the voice in a different way, or even getting a second voice in. And then tempo, right? So that's going from faster, faster, faster. Okay, so tempo, we're going to say speeding up or slowing down. Silences and pauses, we're going to use the concept of rests, which is when you're really taking a pause, or caesuras, where we kind of break for a moment and then get back in. Okay. Tempo, again, speeding up, slowing down, and then change of rhythm. Change of rhythm is a big one to me when we're talking about reading out loud, because of a lot of us can easily fall into the same rhythm of our words, and then it keeps happening, right? We can use it to our good effect as long as it doesn't take us over. So too much of the same rhythm. And pitch. All right. Pitch too. You know, I'm a shrieker sometimes. If I think something's hilarious, I'm up there. The pitch is up there. If I'm angry, it's down, right? We know it's going to change like that. Jane saying, oh, the poetry voice. How old is your daughter, Jane?
She's 30.
Oh, God. I was going to say, is it teenagerdom? It's just adulthood. She's got you down forever, huh? All right. I love that you brought that up, though, because I will admit there is something we call poetry voice, right? Sometimes there's a way that we are like, oh, that person's reading poetry and they're reading it the way we think poetry ought to be read. I already mocked NPR a little bit. I love you, NPR. You're doing good work. But you can usually hear the same kind of sound when Ira Glass is doing This American Life, right? He's going to sound the same most times. And then we can also talk about podcast voice. When people are maybe trying to sound overly friendly and there's a lot of vocal fry, we can identify different patterns here the same way we might say, well, that's disco and that's big band. And why don't you give us another little excerpt?
Sure. Maybe I'll mix it up with something nice and minor. So I've got the this is the theme from Love Story. Where do I begin? Yeah.
Oh, that ending, Em, the ending, right? It goes up. I can't say enough times how amazing it is when an ending goes up. And that's for our voices too. When we're reading a lot of times, and listen, you're going to hear a lot of these things. People end all of their sentences down, right? Which is different from upspeak when we're not sure what we're saying, right? So there's a difference between bringing the inflection up and having that kind of uncertainty to it. Wow. And when I listened to you play that, I felt so wistful. I felt wistful. I think I even yearned a little bit. Anybody else? What were the ways that your feelings or your body understood that piece? Well, I got sadness there. I got sadness. Sentimental. Yeah. Melancholy. Oh my goodness. All right. So a minute ago, we were all easy riders. And now we are melancholic, nostalgic, sentimental, sad, wistful yearners. What the heck, Em? You used your same fingers on the same keyboard. What were some of the differences? What are some of the differences between those two pieces that can possibly create these different feelings for us?
Minor key.
Minor key. Oh, all right. So that sense of kind of going down. What else? Long lines. Okay. When we talk about long lines in our reading out loud, we're speaking about phrasing, right? This may or may not be the same thing as the length of the sentence that you've written, right? Because your reading it out loud might be for a different purpose. A slower tempo. A slower tempo, right? We tend to get excited and speed up. We slow down for different reasons. Okay. Beautiful. All right. The notes, are they crashing? Are they crashing all on top of each other at the same time? They kind of follow, right? They're sort of following each other. We don't have like a dance. Good. We don't have a staccato crashing experience there, but an interplay, right? And this dance, I'm going to use Rose's comment there as a segue to the next thing I want to say about reading aloud before Em's next piece is that many of us write for ourselves, right? We write because that's what we need to say. We write because that's what we have to figure out. But when we read out loud, whether we've written for ourselves or we've written for someone else, the very act of reading the piece out loud turns it into a communion and turns it into a dance, right? When we score, when we annotate our writing for reading out loud, our first thought has to be, how do I want my audience to feel? This is, in fact, an audience-centered experience. It becomes less about us, perhaps, even than the writing was. Because why are we reaching out vocally? Except to reach someone, right? Give us another piece, will you?
Sure. I think I may switch to guitar for this one. This is my rendition of Making Whoopee, and I'll try to put some lyrics in here because this is one that I know the words to a little bit better. Kind of has a little bit more of a narrative to it, but yeah. Another bright, another June, another sunny honeymoon. Another season, another reason for making whoopee. A lot of shoes, a lot of rice. The groom is nervous, he answers twice. It's simply killing that he's so willing to make a whoopee.
I love that. Thank you. One of my favorite things about the lyrics to that song is that they are a great example of being almost spoken, right? Like we are close in this song. You're not getting these like operatic runs, right? And how do we feel with this song? Now, I know this one we had some words, so we know what the words mean, but how else do we feel listening to this piece on the guitar? Light, right? Wants to dance, happy. Yeah. Sonically, this song is almost in the middle of the first two, right? If the first one was like, this is going great, and the second one was like, oh, in here we kind of bring it together. Oh, the words contrasting with the lilt of the music. That's our segue, right? When we're talking about reading out loud, we always want to ask, what's happening in the text, right? This is where, for a moment, we're going to bring in the idea of acting and playwriting, right? Because when someone writes a play, when someone writes a script, the words, they're words, right? They might not have everything apparent because we don't have all of those little taglines next to them the same way we do in a novel, right? It doesn't say, she said wistfully, staring out the window. It says nothing, right? But we have to interpret what it means. How is this character feeling? The last time you talked to your sister on the phone and you said, that sounds wonderful, did you mean, that sounds wonderful, or that sounds wonderful? Or did you say, that sounds wonderful, but you didn't really mean it, right? There are so many different ways that our delivery gives us information that is in addition to the words, right? And that delivery might not always just be more of the same. Okay, the answer to flavor in a dish is not always more salt. Sometimes it's more acid. Sometimes it's more fat, right? Sometimes it's more heat, but it's not always just more salt. Okay, Em, I'm going to ask you to carry along with this theme that we've been doing of kind of remembering some of our childhood experiences and child rearing experiences with music. Could you just play for us Mary Had a Little Lamb?
Sure can.
I knew you could. Literally the most beautiful Mary Had a Little Lamb I have ever heard. Much nicer than the ones around this house. All right. So now Mary Had a Little Lamb. Does it have a pattern of expectation? What do you think? Does it establish a pattern of expectation? I see a little bit of a nod. Yeah, it does, right? It very much does. We basically know where it's going next. Okay. Its rhythm. Is it steady? It's steady, right? It's meter, its tempo, its dynamics, all of those things are about the same throughout, right? It's beautiful, but they're about the same throughout. Now, we tend to start being drawn into these patterns of expectation. It's repetitive, exactly, Jane, when we're young, because we like to be able to know what's going to happen next. It's very scary to be, well, a person. I was going to say a small child, but it's also just terrifying to be alive. We're not really sure what's coming around the corner at any moment. So it can really soothe us when it's repetitive, and it's square like that. Okay, so we've got Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. And everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. We can hear that it's very square. Everything is where it's supposed to be. Okay, so we might use these techniques when we want to be maybe very soothing. We want to comfort people. We want to quiet them down. Maybe we want to soothe them. Could you play Mary Had a Little Lamb for us with some changes in dynamics?
Sure.
Oh my God, right? I have a really different experience listening to that. I felt more listening to that Mary Had a Little Lamb, more like I did when I was feeling wistful and yearning, and we were sort of sad even. Em, could you change again? And this time, could you play Mary Had a Little Lamb for us? Increasing your tempo as you go. Now I'm having a ball, right? Okay, so for here, when we start slowly, we start to where we're expecting things and then really accelerate, we go along, all right? So that made a big change there. Do something else to Mary Had a Little Lamb. I just gave you a few directions. Now you do something.
Yeah, add a little spice here.
Yeah, a spicy lamb. We love this lamb. What did you do to it? Tell us what you did to it, musically speaking.
I added a little bit of syncopation, maybe adding a little bit of Latin Afro-Cuban flavor to that. I don't know, just trying to like kind of have a little bit more of a accented kind of a approach to the melody rather than just the nice evenness that we started with.
All right. So we really moved away from that expected repetitive evenness. So for syncopation, we're talking about ways where we might have said, here is a squareness that we see coming, but then what, right? We're going to work within that. We're going to work within those different kind of rhythms so that we're hitting things in a somewhat more unexpected fashion, right? Lamb moves toward lambada. There we go. I think there's another record in this somewhere, right? So you want to do it one more way? Close us off?
Sure. Yeah, something fancy.
Yeah.
Shoot, I lost track of the melody there. Not too fancy.
Okay, we trust you. So satisfying. But I love what you also said in there. You're like, the reason I lost track of the melody is because it was getting so fancy. And that's another good one for us too. We will almost always go overboard and underboard before we just go bored, right? And when we're practicing, annotating and reading and everything, it is entirely possible that we will do too much. Right. And when we do too much, we're doing too many like acrobatics all over the place. We can lose track of the melody, right? Which is the main feeling or the main experience of our words and how we want our audience to feel. So this is a great way for us to think about practicing. And I call it the over-under split for reasons completely unrelated to the actual over-under split, which is something I know nothing about. Somebody please win some money for me. But basically what we're talking about is the fact that whenever we're trying something new, whether it's a new recipe for pie crust or it's a new methodology for reading and writing, there's going to be one attempt we make that has too little of something, and there's going to be one attempt that we make that has too much of something. There might be other attempts in there too, but that's okay. One of the most important things for figuring out what's just right for us is also figuring out what was too much or too little. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to move on to reading a little bit, and I'm going to have Em play back for you some of what my reading sounds like. Then I'm going to share my screen and show you some of the particular musical symbols that we might be talking about, and leave you also in the chat with a couple of links that you might find of use for this practice. Then I'm going to encourage you to create a system for yourself that either completely uses musical symbols like the one on the chart, if you're comfortable with them already. I know that several people in here read music or play instruments. And if you don't like that, that's fine, because you can make your own symbols. You can be the one who knows what symbol means what for your work. Then we'll take a little bit of time to break out and you kind of see what it looks like if you annotate a few of your sentences there. We'll come back here for a little bit more chat time together and maybe to hear some reading out loud if anybody feels like it. So I am going to just pick a little excerpt from a random George Orwell essay for just no reason, guys. I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see the punctuation, because punctuation is two things at once for us as writers, right? Punctuation is syntax. Punctuation is our very strong attempt at making sure that our sentence means what we want it to mean, but it's also our first effort at rhythm, right? If you are writing poetry, we have two opposing tensions when it comes to rhythm. We have the tension of the sentence and the syntax, which tends to go down the page, and we have the tension of the line, where we decide to break our line, and that tension tends to go across the page. Those two opposing tensions tend to interweave for us. Some of it is built in there anyway, if we honor both our syntax and our break. However, once we practice reading out loud the poem, we might discover that the syntax and the line breaks on the page do not reflect the way we want to read it and the way we want people to hear it. Once you learn that, I suggest changing the page to match how you want it to be heard, because mostly people will meet your poem and read it out loud in their head, and the closest you can get to getting that experience accurate, the better off we are. Okay, I'm choosing prose here, again, just because prose is somewhat more separate in our minds from the concept of musicality. And I'm going to read the first sentence or so for here. I'm going to read it like this. Before the swallow, before the daffodil, and not much later than the snowdrop, a common toad salutes the coming of spring after his own fashion, which is to emerge from a hole in the ground where he has lain buried since the previous autumn, and crawl as rapidly as possible towards the nearest suitable patch of water. Using like one finger on the keyboard or something, or as many as necessary. What did that sound like to your ear?
It sounded like it had a repeating cadence to it. Kind of the pitches seemed like they were kind of all in the same place, very, evenly broken up. And like maybe that's according to the commas in there, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was the same always, right? And it really followed the commas, but it kind of always went down. We got a really strong pattern of expectation. We've got some brokenness in there. All right. So not too much happening. Now, what about this? Before the swallow, before the daffodil, and not much later than the snowdrop, the common toad salutes the coming of spring after his own fashion, which is to emerge from a hole in the ground where he's lain buried since the previous autumn and crawl as rapidly as possible towards the nearest suitable patch of water. What'd that sound like on your keyboard?
On the keyboard?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. If I had to listen to that for too long, I'd start biting through my fingernails and onto the finger probably, right? So again, that was like a little bit rushed. And again, a lot of the same kind of cadence happening there. Let's go back again. This is the Mary Had a Little Lamb of George Orwell here, okay? Before the swallow, before the daffodil, and not much later than the snowdrop, the common toad salutes the coming of spring after his own fashion, which is to emerge from a hole in the ground where he has lain buried since the previous autumn and crawl as rapidly as possible towards the nearest suitable patch of water. Okay, how is that time different from the first two times? And this is for anybody. Em suffered through the first, but how is that time different from the first two times?
Well, the pauses made it more interesting.
It was more interesting. Ah, this is what we want from our reading out loud, right? For everybody. So there were different pauses, and maybe they were not always just because of a comma, right? Okay. So it was more interesting because of pauses. What else? What else made that piece different? Jonathan says that it reflected the meaning. What's the meaning, maybe? I don't even know. What is the meaning of that sentence? Which I'm going to literally copy and put into the chat. Does it have a feeling? Is there a feeling or an emotion word that goes along with it?
I would say that the changes in pitch before they were maybe alternating, and this time you can kind of feel one rise in pitch followed by another, kind of building momentum, I guess, toward maybe like, you know, the most important word of the larger phrase.
Good. So again, we're hearing the word phrase, which is both musical and syntactical. And we're hearing something that musically we would call crescendo, right? Which is not the word for when you get very loud all at once, but rather you're kind of building. Maybe you're building in your volume. Maybe you're crawling up. We have kind of an arpeggio in pitch. You know, we're going up, we're going down. For me, this calls to mind the tide, right? The tide does not come in and go out all at once. It laps in a little bit at a time, and it builds until the ocean takes the beach. And then eventually it recedes the same way. What a different experience it is when the tide comes in all at once. Usually we call that a tsunami, and it is a very different experience to be caught in one of those than it is to watch the tide come in, right? So when we're talking about suddenness or gradual builds, that means something different. All right. There might also be, as Jonathan had pointed out, the irony of the relationship between lyrics and tune or melody sometimes. You might look at this particular sentence and you might decide it means something to you, that you have a particular feeling about it. What do we think? And there is truly no, particular answer here, but we might say, what do we think we're feeling about this toad? Is this a very serious biology textbook? Is it a little funny? Is it a little silly? What's happening in here? I'm scrolling down to one of the following sentences here, still talking about this little buddy, the toad. At this period, after his long fast, the toad has a very spiritual look, like a strict Anglo-Catholic towards the end of Lent. By the time I get to that sentence, I think, this guy's having a good time, right? There's a little bit of humor present in the words. And what a difference it makes. Musically speaking, I'm going to refer to this as mouth shape, right? So if you play, for example, a wind instrument like I do, what a bummer, because you can't sing while you're playing it. But if you play a wind instrument, for example, you might think about your embouchure, you might think about your mouth shape. And the way that we shape our mouth tells us how we can create particular pitches, volumes, all the rest of it, right? Sustaining things. Our mouth shape, while we're reading out loud, does the same thing, okay? Even if nobody sees you, your mouth shape is still affecting the musicality and the emotionality of your words. This is another thing that we can forget about sometimes when we're reading out loud because we are nervous and because we're looking at the page of things that's down in front of us, okay? There are some things that we can do Inside out, I'm going to calm down so I can do a better job. And there's some things that we can do outside in. I'm going to shape my mouth the way it's shaped when I'm having a good time. And then it's going to sound like I'm having fun, even if it's miserable. Amazing. So when we're thinking about using the full body here, I encourage you to think about, even look at yourself in the mirror. Nobody will think you're vain about it. And say, where is my mouth when I'm smiling? What's happening vocally when I'm looking at somebody I love? When I'm laughing at somebody I love? When I'm really sad? Right? The way the mouth moves with that emotion, if you replicate it while you're reading out loud, you will get that sense across. Okay. What I want us to look at right now is a little bit more screen sharing. And then I'm also going to give you some links, and we're going to get close to breaking out and annotating. So some of these things might be of interest to you if you just want some lists of possible things to think about while you're looking at your writing, right? So staccato, for example, the term staccato here, Em, play a note staccato for us. Bump, there it is, right? So we might be speaking staccato if I say a dot. Precise, right? Even if it's a longer word, get a and get off it. That staccato might be something that we do for emphasis. A legato or a slur. Play some slurred notes. Yeah, they all melt together. And sometimes we might melt all of our words together without a lot of pauses. And it's not that I'm speaking more quickly there, it's that I'm joining those words in phrasing. Okay. A fermata or a hold. We might think about this when we want to bring emphasis to a particular word. That's a fermata, right? We might also think about dynamics. So this is when we were talking about getting very soft or getting very loud. Where do you want to do that? How and why and to which effect? We associate big feelings with large dynamics, right? The louder it gets. Have you ever been at an outdoor concert at the 4th of July and you've got all the drums and then the piccolos comes in, and you're like, whoa, this is a lot, right? This is very loud. This is a very loud experience. We get really excited for it. And then those softer, more wistful times, they do something else, okay? Just always purposeful here. When we're thinking about rests, I encourage us to think about different kinds of rests. There might be a very brief rest, right? I just want to pause here just for a bit, or I might want to give a lot of silence here. Don't be afraid of silence in our readings, right? We can use it. Music is also about what's not playing, all right? As we think about things like that, I'm also going to give you this little link in the chat so that if you want to play around and do some more work, saying, well, what are some of these other elements that I can think of when it comes to what I want to write down in my piece, then you might enjoy clicking through some of those things there. And then finally, I'm going to show us a particular little chart, which I will also attach as a file to the chat. And this is a brief listing of some of the music symbols and terms that we've been speaking about tonight. Okay, we have an accent. We're talking about slowly and expressively, fast and lively. We're talking about this crescendo, gradually getting louder, decrescendo, gradually getting softer. We've talked about this fermata or this hold. We have these other dynamic tempos when we're saying suddenly, you know, we're getting louder. Maybe we're getting more slow, on and on. Am I tying these? Am I slurring them together? Am I rapidly alternating? If you are already familiar with musical notation, or if you want to particularly use notation, then please use either what it is that you know already, or what it is that you're seeing from this particular, if I can actually attach, can I access to file attachment restricted by your account admin? Whoa, that's horrific. Well, I can't share that with you, but I'll figure it out another way. And you can get to it by going, or you can get to something like that at least by going to a link that I will give you. So how about them apples? There you go. It's an ugly link, but the sheet is there. At this point, I'm going to invite everybody to mute their camera, mute their microphone, give themselves a little bit of time away. We are going to take 10 minutes for you to look over the writing sample that you've brought, and I'll check in with you if 10 minutes is getting too long, to look it over and say, how do I want this to be heard? How do I want my audience to feel? And where are some of the places that I can begin annotating this to leave myself a roadmap to how I can get to those responses? So I'm going to bring the group back together at about 7:17. Please take your time away now.
So Jamie, I'm going to stop the tape now. This is Robin. And for
Excellent.
those who are listening to this on video, thank you for coming. And I'll put the Story House Ithaca and the Community Arts Partnership links in the description of this event. And now I'm looking for the stop tape. Good night, everyone. Or not to the people who are actually here.